There is always the dilemma as to whether this is child abuse is an actual event as being reported by the mother. So on the one hand, if the mother allows it, they'll say, well, she is a neglectful mother and take the child away because you neglected to protect. And on the other hand, all too often, the mother says, especially after a divorce, a separation or a divorce, where the mother is now able to see things that she didn't realize that were going on, like child sexual abuse, on behalf of the perpetrated by the ex-husband. Now she's able to see these symptoms.
Folks, remember, I was a social worker first in New Orleans Juvenile Court, and I went to law school, and then at night, and then I was attorney for Child Protective Services. Then I was a juvenile court judge. Then I'm now Court of Appeal judge, only retired last month. That encompasses 48 years, and I've dealt with well over 2,000 cases of allegations of child sexual abuse. Then that's a conservative estimate in the 48 years. Go fast. PAS. The comments, PAS theory is junk. By the way, I can only give you the sound bites. There are articles that these sound bites came from. PAS theory is junk science that Dr. Richard Gardner invented. A concept and talked at as if it were proven science. It is not. This is Dr. Paul Fink, past president of the American Psychiatric Association. Next. PAS is not research-based, and it has done a great injustice to the family and the justice system. The criteria Dr. Gardner had developed are virtually useless. He operates on the premise that if you say a lie often enough, people will believe it. Dr. John Conte. And folks, these names are highly reputable, respected names. Their research is peer-reviewed. Next. Eli Neuberger from Harvard. PAS is an atrocious theory with no science to back it up. Next. It is not helpful for the community to be hoodwinked by information that's not rigorously tested. And then if that is still enough, if there are any judges in the audience, and when I tell judges, if this is not enough for you, your own National Council of Juvenile Court Judges has a volume called Navigating Custody and Visitation Evaluations in Cases with Domestic Violence, a judge's guide, and it's written by Claire Dalton, Leslie McDragle, and the Honorable Francis F. Wong from Hawaii. This is the juvenile court's official position, the National Family of Juvenile Courts, and they say Richard Gardner's theory, positing the existence of a parental alienation syndrome, or PAS, has been totally discredited by the scientific community. Testimony that a party to a custody case suffers from a syndrome should therefore be ruled inadmissible, both under the standard established by Dober and the stricter Fry standard. You should not admit it in evidence as court, and I ask every single judge who has used this, where is your evidence to refute this? Show me your studies to refute this. Show me your experts to refute, because it doesn't exist. And yet you perpetuate. We got 5 minutes. Wow. How much, and this is the leading study of the sexual abuse in the national study. You really have to go into it, characteristics, and this showed that approximately 26% of boys, 26% of women, 16% of boys had been sexually abused as youths. Now, Dr. Paul Fink, who co-authored that article with me, wrote, and this was furnished to me by the Leadership Council, he says, if sexual abuse were a newly discovered disease, a disease that affects up to 20% of women and 10% of men, a disease that costs society over $24 billion a year, what do you think that would response would be? And yesterday somebody said it correct. When it's a stranger, you have no problem at all prosecuting them. When it's people of influence, it's another story, and especially when it's a spouse, then it's another story. Who commits child sexual abuse? Everybody, every race and so forth. But folks, if there's ever the stereotypical case that comes from my experience, I don't like to give anecdotal, except I've been involved, folks. Remember, I was a social worker first in New Orleans Juvenile Court. And I went to law school. And then at night, and then I was attorney for Child Protective Services. Then I was a juvenile court judge. Then I'm now Court of Appeal judge, only retired last month. That encompasses 48 years. And I've dealt with well over 2,000 cases of allegations of child sexual abuse. Then that's a conservative estimate in the 48 years. And who does it? Everybody. But what is the case? And I read this once. And my experience certainly validates it. I think 2,000 is a pretty big sample. Who do I see the most? And the public, I see white, middle class, better than average income, better than average educated, often a pillar of the community. Raise your hand who has encountered such a person in child sexual abuse? A lot. Okay, but I'm a judge. I wanted verification. So here's a letter from the authors of that study by Thones and Pearson. Said, yeah, that's what the study said. Here's a letter to back it up. And then, now, how many false allegations? This is what they're always saying. The tremendous study was done in 1990. Are we up to that one? How many times false allegations? And this study, look who did it. The Association of Conciliation Courts, a national organization, a court organization, did a study of over 9,000 cases of contested custody cases. And they're saying you always raise sexual abuse. It's the atomic bomb whenever there's custody cases. The custody, the accusations, and this is just you really need time to go into this study because it's monumental. And all of us involved in this field know about this study. All of us involved. And it involved 9,000 cases in 12 states, 12 courts, in-depth interview, in-depth studies, and in 2% of the cases were there allegations. Now these are contested. You're fighting for custody. How many times did they allege child sexual abuse? Only 2%. That means 180 times. Now, mothers only made this accusation against fathers in 48% of that. That means 86 cases. So there's 2%, there's 180 cases. Mothers made accusations in 86 cases. Then, how many were intentionally false? It says 5 to 8%. Intentionally false. So if I take the 8% figure, that comes to 7 cases. Intentionally false statements made by mothers was 7 times out of 9,000. You show me anything at law that doesn't have a much higher rate of false accusations. If I'm suing you for anything that comes in law, that's the least I've ever seen in any area.